भद्रं कर्णेभिः शृणुयाम देवाः भद्रं पश्येमाक्षभिर्यजत्राः स्थिरैरङ्गैस्तुष्टुवागुंसस्तनूभिः व्यशेम देवहितं यदायुः स्वस्ति न इन्द्रो वृद्धश्रवाः स्वस्ति नः पूषा विश्ववेदाः स्वस्ति नस्तार्क्ष्यो अरिष्टनेमिः स्वस्ति नो बृहस्पतिर्दधातु ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः। अथाश्वलायनो भगवन्तं परमेष्ठिनमुपसमेत्योवाच अधीहि भगवन् ब्रह्मविद्यां वरिष्ठां सदा सद्भिः सेव्यमानां निगूढाम् यया चिरात् सर्वपापं व्यपोह्य परात् परं पुरुषं याति विद्वान् तस्मै स होवाच पितामहश्च श्रद्धा भक्तिध्यानयोगादवैः न कर्मणा न प्रजया धनेन त्यागेनैके अमृतत्वमानशुः परेण नाकं निहितं गुहायां विभ्राजते यद्यतयो विशन्ति वेदान्तविज्ञानसुनिश्चितार्थाः सन्न्यासयोगाद्यतयः शुद्धसत्त्वाः ते ब्रह्मलोकेषु परान्तकाले परामृतात् परिमुच्यन्ति सर्वे विविक्तदेशे च सुखासनस्थः शुचिः समग्रीव शिरः शरीरः अत्याश्रमस्थः सकलेन्द्रियाणि निरुध्य भक्त्या स्वगुरुं प्रणम्य हृत्पुण्डरीकं विरजं विशुद्धं विचिन्त्य मध्ये विशदं विशोकम् अचिन्त्यमव्यक्तमनन्तरूपं शिवं प्रशान्तममृतं ब्रह्मयोनिम् तथादिमध्यान्तविहीनमेकं विभुं चिदानन्दमरूपमद्भुतम् उमासहायं परमेश्वरं प्रभुं त्रिलोचनं नीलकण्ठं प्रशान्तम् ध्यात्वा मुनिर्गच्छति भूतयोनिं समस्तसाक्षिं तमसः परस्तात् स ब्रह्मा स शिवस्येन्द्रः सोऽक्षरः परमस्वराट् स एव विष्णुः स प्राणः स कालोऽग्निः स चन्द्रमाः स एव सर्वं यद्भूतं यच्च भव्यं सनातनम् ज्ञात्वा तं मृत्युमत्येति नान्यः पन्था विमुक्तये सर्वभूतस्थमात्मानं सर्वभूतानि चात्मनि सम्पश्यन् ब्रह्म परमं याति नान्येन हेतुना।
Ashwalayana's question was, "Oh Lord, please teach me the Brahma Vidya." To which Lord Brahma says, "Shraddha Bhakti Dhyana Yoga Davehi." Know that by yoga of Shraddha, Bhakti and Dhyana. Shraddha is with reference to faith, and we discussed it as much more than faith. So you can say that there is an intellectual aspect also there, that the conviction with which you follow the faith till the end is Shraddha. Bhakti is a devotional aspect which involves the mind. When intellect and mind combines, and then you slowly get into the single pointed concentration, it culminates in meditation, which is dhyana. So the whole idea of knowing the self is to finally dissolve our thought flow. So the thought flow is directed towards the higher by the intellect. It is constantly in that quality of devotion which is maintained there. And in the ultimate process, both mind and intellect dissolve into the self. Once the mind and intellect dissolves, there is no individuality. What remains is the self. So the only way to gain realization is knowledge of the self only. This is the basic lesson that is given here. In the second part of the mantra, as I said, he goes on to say that na karmana na prajaya dhanena tyagena ekena amritatvamanshuhu. The direct means of liberation or self-realization is only jnana. This theory has to be very strongly understood. There is no other way for realization. In Atma Bodha, verse 2, it says, Bodhonya sadhanebhyohi sakshan mokshaika sadhanam. Just as fire is used for cooking, fire is the direct means for cooking, knowledge alone is the means for liberation. Though we can have various subsidiary activities that are required and essential that are done before cooking, but if you consider actual cooking, what is the cause? Fire is the cause. But you need to definitely prepare by cleaning the vegetables, cutting the vegetables, and you need to wash the rice, various things that you need to do. But when it comes to actual cooking, fire is the cause. Exactly like that, he says, there is only one way for realization, that is knowledge of the self alone. There is no other way. Various other paths, various other yogas, everything is given. All that is meant as preparation for gaining the knowledge of the self. And you cannot gain the knowledge of the self before that also. So that preparation is definitely required. But if you go by the cause and effect, the direct cause for liberation is actually gaining the knowledge of the self. This is emphasized again by Adi Shankaracharya in Bhaja Govindam also. He says, Jnana vihina sarva matena muktim na bhajati janmashatena. Sarva matena means according to all schools of thought. See, there are various schools of thought within Vedanta itself and within our Hindu darshanas, philosophies itself. And they may differ as to what that final state of realization is. But what they consider as realization is actually the product of jnana only. It is merely the interpretation of the Vedantic scripture in their own way that they say this is what it is. So sarva matena, according to all schools of thought, what is the direct means for liberation is jnana. Jnana vihina sarva matena. So he gives that in the context of, today it's very important that people go to Ganga Sagar on this auspicious day, Makara Sankranti. So kurute Ganga Sagara Gamanam. People go to Ganga Sagar, where the Ganga meets ocean, that is very auspicious, very holy, and they go there and take a dip and they do all the rituals there. Vrata Paripalanam, they do various vratas, various vows, various rituals. Athava Danam, Danam is again considered a very, very auspicious and noble karma activity. So, and these are all noble activities, these are all sanctioned activities. So you can go for pilgrimage, you can observe certain vows, you can do dana and various other related activities. Vrata Paripalanam Athava Danam. But then second line he says, Jnana vihina sarva matena muktim na bhajati janmashatena. Without jnana, without knowledge, even if you take 100 lives, realization will not occur. Liberation will not occur. This is not to belittle any practice, but this is to say what is the direct cause, and all other practices are required for us to prepare towards that direct cause only. Otherwise, we will definitely get punya, we will get various other benefits of whatever we do, and you may enjoy higher benefits, but again you have to come back to this Mrityu Loka, this world, and continue your journey. So, all punya karmas, various other activities that we do definitely are elevating, but they have their limitations in the ultimate liberation. That is emphasized here. Na karmana, na prajaya, dhanena tyagena, mritatvamanshuhu. Why he emphasizes this here is, in the earlier portion of the Vedas, it is very much emphasized that one must do karma. Yavat jivet agnihotram, you have to do, it says. Yavat jivet means till the time you live, you have to do agnihotra. Agnihotram is a fire ritual that you do. Till you do, you have to do it. There are even now maybe certain orthodox people who do, it could be very rare, but that fire that is lit for this must not be put off at all, and they take it and keep it again, the next day do it. It is like lifelong practice that they do. It has to be continuously done. So, lifelong you have to do rituals, it is said. And it is not just said in the earlier portion, certain portions of even Upanishads. We are going to see in the next Upanishad, Mundaka, it is said, whatever ritual is prescribed, do it properly, it says. It says in the Upanishad. So, there has been lot of emphasis on doing karma in the Vedas, and the bulk portion of Vedas, which is the Karma Kanda, is to use the mantras to do the rituals only. So, many rituals are given, many methodologies of doing it, etc. And then we also saw during the Bhagavad Gita time, sage Vedavyasa gives a new interpretation to the yajna, saying that any activity you do can be performed in the spirit of yajna. So therefore, action is very much emphasized. And Arjuna, as we know in Bhagavad Gita, is Adhikari who wants to run away from action and is brought back into action. So therefore, doing karma at all points of time is very much emphasized. And you must do, it says in the Vedas. In the later portion, which is Vedanta, it says, na karmana, na prajaya, dhanena. It is not by karma. Next he is going to say not by praja, etc. So, it is very interesting. Direct sort of contradictory statements it is given. That is why it is said that Upanishads or Vedas, etc. has to be learnt under a proper guru and in a proper traditional way, so that they know exactly how to teach according to that adhikaris. In the initial portion where it is emphasized that one must do the karma, etc., one is assumed to be a person who is in the initial stage of the spiritual journey, which is what most of us belong to. And he is getting into Grihastha-ashrama, or before that he is having that sacred thread and he is getting into Grihastha-ashrama, where the experimentation of all the knowledge is taking place there, where he is performing all the rituals. So his life is set on the path of dharma, etc. And then when he is in the stage of a little bit withdrawal, when he has finished his karma, when he is in a very higher state of knowledge or renunciation, then his inquiry is of a different type. That is the time he is asked to get into the higher stage and seek the self directly. So Guru comes in two stages in our life. The first stage, we can call him Acharya also, where sacred thread is there for him and he is initiated into life, as it were, into the study, into dharma, into life, and doing the rituals and getting into household, whatever it is. A later stage, another Guru comes who takes that sacred thread off and he says, you are meant for knowledge of the self. So there he is very clearly emphasizing when you are seeking, because here Ashvalayana is seeking the self and he is a well prepared student. That's what we understood by that word Atha. Atha means after that. After that Ashvalayana came, meaning he is a very well prepared student. For such a student, he very clearly says, na karmana, not by action. Now, one thing we have to remember is, it is not just by dropping actions per se that it is going to happen, or rather that is not the natural way. In fact, Swamiji also says, if you have listened to his lectures, that it is not that you will drop rituals, but rituals will one day drop out of you. They will leave you. So, when a person gets into the higher state of awareness and knowledge, automatically when you are becoming more introvert and absorbing in nature, the extroverted tendency will automatically drop off. So therefore, at some stage, we need to graduate from school, then to college, then to post-graduation, then to, like that it has to go. So you cannot say that I will keep on doing karma and get stuck at that level only. So it is for, at various grades that it is given. A question may arise when there are certain statements also given in Gita that Karmanaivahi samsiddhim astita janakadayaha. In 3rd chapter, when Arjuna is prompted into action, Krishna gives various appeals as to why he must do action at the intellectual level and then at the emotional level. At the emotional level, he gives examples of great people of the past, Raja Rishis, who have attained realization, he says, through karma. Karmanaivahi samsiddhim. Samsiddhim means ultimate perfection. Astita janakadaya. Janakadaya means Janaka etc. Janaka etc. means various kings in the lineage of great Ashwapati, Janaka, Rama and various stalwarts of the past. He says have attained samsiddhim through karma only. Wherever the statements are given, you have to understand the theorem that all this prepares you and then jnana dwara, through jnana only go. In some places in Puranas etc., even to emphasize the importance of that, suppose in Ganga, Ganga Mahatmyam or something, he says, you take bath in Ganga and that will take you to moksha, it says. That means everybody now, half of India must be already liberated if that is the case. It is not so. I mean, what it means is that purification is a process by which it prepares you for knowledge. So that fill in the blanks, jnana dwara must be filled in by you all points of time. So this is the theorem. But in order to emphasize the importance of karma to Arjuna at that point of time, he says, forefathers of you, who were all great kings, who were all in the thick and thin of society doing their duty as the king, they attained liberation. And their main emphasis was karma yoga only. So why are you running away from action? This is an appeal that he is appealing to the, reverence that Arjuna has for his forefathers. So he is giving the example of great person, because Janaka is a standard example everywhere. He is a jnani, but he never left his duties as a king. He was there performing all the duties. He was a great karma yogi also, but he was a brahmajnani. So he was able to attain realization, but chiefly he chose the path of karma yoga and he did. So therefore, since Arjuna belongs to the same adhikari level as that, he is emphasizing like that. So it must be understood in the context like that. But here the statement gives us a theorem that it is na karmana, not by action that you will get this. Predominance of karma yoga is required only to make us get prepared for the knowledge. And obviously, no question of talking about any desire-ridden action. Here he is talking about even great selfless actions. Whatever be the actions, action and knowledge are inherently incompatible. Action is a product of ignorance, and what we are talking about, knowledge, is totally different. So ignorance cannot be a direct cause for self-knowledge. This is a clear theorem here. Therefore, the lesson for us here is, even at the level that we are, when you are doing rituals or when you are doing karma yoga at your own level by doing your office work or whatever activities you are doing in the spirit of karma yoga, keep the awareness of the self and perform the action. This will make us not repeat our actions in the future, rather it will burn the vasanas and elevate us. So the whole idea of exhausting actions is to perform the actions in a particular way. So therefore, keep the awareness of the self in the subtle intellect at the back of the mind and then perform the actions. This is the way for us, because extroverted persons like most of us who have to do actions in the world have to continue with actions. But let not the actions be guided by your desire. Let the actions be guided by the ultimate goal of the self. This is exactly what Krishna also mentions to Arjuna in 2nd chapter. He says, I will teach you what is known as Buddhi Yoga, he says in the middle of 2nd chapter. Buddhi Yoga is this only. Buddhi Yoga, and after Buddhi Yoga, after saying the statement, he talks only about karma. What it means is you have to do the karma with your buddhi associated with the self. That is what he calls as buddhi yoga in second chapter. Second chapter is Sankhya yoga, where in the middle he introduces this term buddhi yoga. So with the awareness on the self, we need to perform actions. But the theorem is na karmana. It is not going to get you to realization directly. Na prajaya. Not by progeny. Exactly like that. Again, it was recommended earlier that a person has to have progeny. He has to have a son, etc. And probably in some smriti, it is given that you may have to produce even 10 children like that. As we said a couple of classes earlier, that smriti is a codified way of interpretation of law of Shruti, which is applicable to a particular time and period, which cannot be universally applied. Now, what is emphasized, even in Taittiriya Upanishad it comes, do not break the lineage, let there be continuity in the chain. It comes in the set of orders that the Guru gives as though in a convocation address after the course is over. That is where it comes as Satyam, Vada, Dharmam, Chara, all these commandments are given. There he says, don't leave Swadhyaya, give the Dakshina to the Guru properly. All these instructions are given. And in that he says, do not leave this lineage. So there is a lot of emphasis given on this because as in the case of every other activity, this is also considered a very, very divine and holy activity. That's about all. In continuation with this, you are able to maintain that knowledge for the next generation. That is the purpose of it, nothing else. Whatever has been you are doing and it is being done, the continuity of which is in usefulness to the society, in usefulness to the whole universe itself, that needs to be continued. So that is a very natural order which you need not do, and therefore there was an emphasis on this. In fact, the term putra itself in Sanskrit is, the meaning is that one who saves you from the hell called Put. By giving oblations, etc., he is not allowing you to stay there. This is the etymological meaning of it. So there is an emphasis on that. But in the later portion in the Upanishads, it says, by doing that you are not going to gain realization. If you are not careful, you will produce a lot of children who will be very a burden on the society if that knowledge itself is not passed. It will be counterproductive. So it is not a great virtue per se. Each and everything for that matter, the karma that you do, all the activities that we do, only when it is done with a purpose has it some meaning, and it can be productively used for our evolution. So just by doing this, a person's realization is not guaranteed. There have been various great stalwarts who just either they did not marry at all, or they just married and they were just coupled together. But they were great stalwarts who even probably realized the self. So the direct liberation is not dependent upon this. Also, Swamiji has recommended or interpreted this as not as a birthright also. Na prajaya, in the sense, it is not, realization is not a birthright just because you are born in a certain lineage or certain varna or certain jati or whatever it is. It is just not there. As far as jnanam, the ultimate jnanam is concerned, and as far as bhakti is concerned, it is 100% open for all. There is no distinction or demarcation there. The demarcation comes only in karma. It is very clear. Karma is with reference to one's gunas, one's swadharma, one's swabhava. Therefore, there will be distinction and demarcation as to who does what. As far as bhakti is concerned, where you feel one with that supreme, and when you see jnanam, which is the ultimate realization, it is open for all. Recently, there is a controversy in Tamil Nadu. If you had watched or followed some news, a poet who writes, a lyricist rather, we should not call him a poet, a lyricist who writes songs for movies. He has created a controversy by saying certain things about Andal. Andal is a sort of avatar of Mahalakshmi itself. That's how she is considered. Nothing less than that. And if you want any close parallel, you can say like she is like Mirabai of the south, who sort of married the Lord himself. Nothing. And among the 12 Alvars, she is there. Alvars are the highest devotees of Lord Vishnu. Amongst the 12, she finds a place. Now, why I am saying this, if you find the 12 Alvars, you will find there are persons with every background, and all of them are merged with the Supreme. All of them are nothing but realized soul, only from our terminology point of view. There is a person who comes from an agricultural background there. There is a king there. There is a Brahmin there. There is a person who is untouchable. There is a normal priest type of a person. Everybody, and a lady. So what it means is, and not only here, even in Shaivites, you have the 9 masks, 63 in number. Only 3 of them are Brahmins. If you want the statistics and count by which, there are ladies. Again, every walk of life it is there. So when it comes to realization, you find that it is really not restricted to any particular community or any particular gender, or in any way the demarcation should not be applied. Yes, there are certain advantages by virtue of your gunas, etc., that you can move forward little easy, and for others little difficult in certain areas it may be there. That is possible. That is why in the 9th chapter Krishna says, Striyo Vaishyas Tada Shudra. He says, even woman and even Vaishya and even Shudra, they can realize, he says. Then what is the problem for you, Arjuna, when you are already in the stage of a Raja Rishi? And what is the problem for a Brahmin who is already having a lot of sattva with him? This is what he says. Therefore, it is not denied, or it is not a birthright that somebody has a hold over it. This is also one interpretation that we can take here. Na karmana, na prajaya, dhanena tyagena amritatvamanshuhu. But by renunciation of wealth, some have attained that immortality. It is exactly the parallel what we saw in Ishavasya Upanishad as Tena Tyaktena Bhunjita. May you attain that by renunciation. Wealth represents the world in general. Everything in this world is connected with the wealth. So what it means by renunciation of wealth is renunciation of the value that we have for this world in general. By and large, everything, if you connect, finally it boils down to wealth only. Each and everything has a value in that way. And most of the time, our thoughts are centered around the world in some form or the other. So a standard line is given for which the basic attachment comes from the wealth. So if a person is able to take off his attachment from the wealth, he has attained certain amount of renunciation, as it were. So by placing the right value upon the world, you are elevating yourself to higher state. So this is what Swamiji mentioned in this lecture, Viveka and Vairagya, that renunciation is not giving up, but it is taking up rather. Giving up is an effect. When you keep your foot on the higher rung of the ladder, you automatically remove yourself from the lower rung of the ladder, which is an effect. So this is called as renunciation. So renunciation is exactly like a growth. It is maturity, and it again comes out of knowledge. A person cannot renounce anything unless otherwise he has gained knowledge of the higher. So the example of a child renouncing the toys comes only when the child is introduced or made aware of a bicycle. So knowledge of the bicycle makes it renounce the toys. Rather, the toys renounce the child, we say. Just as that toys automatically, they go away from it. So renunciation is an effect. And you need to just go through the chapter on renunciation in Vedanta Treatise, which is one of the very beautiful chapters, where he analyzes by saying that this has nothing to do with you being in the society or not in the society. That means you can be out of the society also, or you can be in the society. Being in the society, whether you contact the sense objects or not contact the sense objects. See, if this knowledge is meant for renunciates, and that means only if it is meant for those who have moved to the forest, which is away from the society, then it is very, very less number of people who will be adhikaris for Vedanta. then it is not a very practical philosophy. But we have seen in the past also, as he gave the example of Janaka, etc., who were in the thick and thin of society and they practiced this renunciation. Many grahasthas who wear the white dhotis have shown remarkable renunciation, greater than even those who have taken up ochre robes. We have seen history also in our own country in various corners. They have proved also. So it has nothing to do with whether being in the society or outside the society. Even great or those people who take up the ochre robes, they are to be worshipped. It is but like who do, let us say a person studies mathematics and it is meant for everybody to study. But in the classroom, one or two will go into deeper study of that and do a research or a PhD in that. Like that, some may take this completely into it and they may do a complete research into it. They may withdraw themselves into a forest and do that. But most of the other people will apply mathematics in society. Like that, you can apply Vedanta in wherever you are. So you can be here practicing it. And you can contact the sense objects also. Otherwise, it will be a very, very frustrating experience. You be in the society, but you are not allowed to contact any object. Means that cannot be a case for renunciation. And there is no restriction on quantum also. You can, as though, enjoy as much as you want. So absurd examples of Krishna marrying so many wives, Durvasa eating all the time, all this is given to an absurd degree for us to make us think. And yet, renunciation is glorified and they are considered renunciates because the value that they keep for what they contact determines renunciation. A person can actually have renounced everything. He may just have just a begging bowl, but he may be attached to that begging bowl. He is not a renunciate. In the case of South India, there is a great saint who was a renunciate. He is on north gate of this temple with his begging bowl and arms. He is there. On the southern gate is his disciple, who was a king who has left everything, and he is there on the other side. And this man was a great man of evolution. And the girl was very attracted towards him, genuinely, by his stature, and she wanted to marry. And the father was very humble enough to approach him and request that. So this guru says, "I am really a renunciate," because he was already married and he renounced everything and he came here. But my Shishya is on the other side, who is a samsari, he says. And they go to the other side to propose to him. And he is startled because he was also a king. He left everything and genuinely thought he was following this. But he had actually, fallen in love with the dog which was there and he was just taking care of it. And then he was just, he left everything, but he was taking care of this and he had a special attachment towards that dog from that time onwards. Then he comes running around to this side and says to the guru, he says, "What have you said? I have left everything and I am trying to gain knowledge through you as my guru and you are saying that I am a samsari." And then he points out, this is your attachment to the dog. And that is the time he realizes that the attachment is at the mental level, that you can leave everything. But that bondage can be there to a small thing that at that point of time. So that really determines whether we are renunciate. So the quantum of wealth we have or don't have, etc., doesn't really determine it. And the story goes, but he breaks that bowl on the dog's head, kills the dog and kills himself. Kills himself in the sense, he actually goes on to realize the self before the guru. That is the story of it. Now, so therefore it has nothing to do with the quantum of our contact also. But what is then really renunciation? This analysis seems to give a license for us to do whatever we want and claim that we are renunciates. That is not possible. It is possible only when you set higher values in life, where the mind begins to appreciate and give higher value for certain things, by virtue of which our attachment to the lower automatically comes down. So you cannot try and reduce your value for money or relationship or family or status or power or position directly. It is just not possible. It is exactly like how the in that Birbal story where he says, if you want to reduce the size of the line without touching it, you have to draw only a bigger line. So without touching it, if you want to reduce it, you can only concentrate on something apart from it. So since our mind is already caught up in certain things and having certain values, it is not possible for the mind to say that what is in money or what is in family, leave everything. It cannot leave. Instead, the mind must appreciate certain things higher. That is why with certain amount of experience in the world and with certain intelligence, don't we all know really what not to do or what not to think of? Ego is wrong, anger is wrong, or all these things we know. We don't need a Bhagavad Gita or a guru to say this. But we need to be taught as to what to think of, what to do as sadhana. So that is where Vedanta actually helps. It tells that there is something called the self. So it makes our thought go there. So the value that you set for it automatically reduces your value for wealth, as it were. Tena tyaktena bunjita. May you enjoy by renunciation. That is exactly what it means. And on the other hand, people who take it up as a sadhana to renounce wealth and take up an akarog, they need to be worshipped also. They are great people. And if they are able to practice with that Dhrida Vairagya, probably that is the shortest way. But only stalwarts can do it. Only great people can do it. Adi Shankaracharya, whose avatara was to even show us the glory of the fourth ashrama, which is Sannyasa ashrama, even his own time, where people have taken up ochre robes and not really used that ashrama properly, he really condemns them and takes pity on them and says various vesha that they do. Jatilo mundi lunchita keshaha kashayambar bahukruta veshaha pashyannapi cha na pashyati moodaha udara nimittam bahukruta veshaha. And he is condemning pseudo sannyasis. And particularly at that time, probably a little bit of influence of Buddhism, where it directly encouraged renunciation more and more as a common thing for everyone, which is not the case, which cannot be the case. So he's saying some people can pull out hair one by one. Some people go bald completely. And they do various other things. And they put on kashayambara bahukruta vesha. They put on the ochre robes. Why do they do this? They do it udara nimittam. They do it for belly's sake. Even today, if you are putting on ochre robe, even if you are a pseudo sannyasi, food is guaranteed. Some sort of people still have value for it. So it's a very easy way. Swami Ramtirtha also condemns that in 20th century. And he says, Pashyannapi cha na pashyati moodaha. Actually, they have taken up a path by which they are supposed to see the truth, but they are not seeing the truth. And they are just settling it or exchanging it for a low value. So he is actually taking pity upon them. So Shankaracharya condemns that in his century, wherever he lived 2500 years ago, or commonly understood as 12 centuries ago, whatever be it, even at that time, this was there. So ochre robe by itself is not something it is going to guarantee, but a person who is really able to do it, there is a quality of 12th chapter, 35 qualities of Bhakta, where it says about Aniketaha. Aniketaha means homeless. Actually, it is referring to detachment from home, as it were. But there are various other qualities which are given as equivalent words for that. But Aniketaha means he really goes away from home. He is just, meaning he has just removed himself from that particular small home. He has taken up the universe as his big home. They are really stalwarts. Like that, people are there even today, but maybe very, very less. Maybe proportionately very less. And we need to really, if we need to really spot them, and if we come in contact with them, probably that satsang we should not leave. It is by that their grace that we will elevate ourselves. So, Dhanena Tyagena Amritatvamanshu. Some people have attained this, he says. Some people have attained means it is an encouragement for all of us. that it can be attained. Amritatvam means immortality. Mrita means death. Amrita means immortal. Immortality means a changeless state. So the changeless state is the state of Brahman. So Ashwalya's question was with reference to Brahma Vidya, and the ultimate end of it all is that you attain that state of absolute changelessness. To him verily Lord Brahma said, know that by the yoga of Shraddha, Bhakti and Dhyana, not by activity, nor by progeny, by renunciation of wealth, some attained immortality. We'll chant mantra 3 twice.
परेण नाकं निहितं गुहायां विभ्राजते यद्यतयो विशन्ति वेदान्तविज्ञानसुनिश्चितार्थाः सन्न्यासयोगाद्यतयः शुद्धसत्त्वाः परेण नाकं निहितं गुहायां विभ्राजते यद्यतयो विशन्ति वेदान्तविज्ञानसुनिश्चितार्थाः सन्न्यासयोगाद्यतयः शुद्धसत्त्वाः.
That which is higher than heaven, seated in the cave, shining resplendent, that the ascetics enter. Those ascetics are well established in Vedantic wisdom to become pure sattva, self, through yoga of renunciation. As I said in some editions of Kaivalya Upanishad, the second part of mantra 2 and the first part of mantra 3 is the actual mantra 3. The second part of mantra 3 and the mantra 4, which is given in only one line, it is mantra 4, and then the rest continues. Even traditionally, when we invite a great person, particularly in functions, they give what is known as a maryada or honor for welcoming him is called Purna Kumbha. Purna Kumbha, Kumbha means the pot, Purna means it is complete, and they keep a coconut or mango leaves, or it could vary from place to place little, but it's a very holy and auspicious thing. And when sannyasins are invited, even in you will find in Shankara Hall or various places here, they chant these two mantras which are considered very, very auspicious in the occasion. And it is talking about them directly. It starts from that Nakarmana na prajaya, from there till end of fourth mantra. Paramritat parimuchyanti sarve. I asked you to check one small difference. Anybody did that? Maybe you have forgotten the question itself.
No, I tried to find it out, but I could not make out the difference. Except that there was some, in one the word was joined, in the other the word was given.
What is that word?
It is this one. Most probably sannyasa yoga.
No, not sannyasa yoga. Okay, you have one more week. You try. The same mantra comes in the Mundaka Upanishad. Same mantra means the second part of the third mantra and the fourth. Verbatim same. Exactly the same. There is only one small difference. Very, very, very minute difference that is there. Try to see what the difference is.
Mantra 3 and over here.
Mantra 3 second.
Second part of mantra 3 and mantra 4, which is one mantra, and one comes in Mundaka. Mundaka mantra 6 of part 3. Mundaka, part 3, second part, mantra 6. Yeah. Verbatim the same, exactly the same, but you will find the interpretation is different in that and in this. When we come there, it's a different interpretation you will find. Okay. Topic 1 of Kaivalya Upanishad talks about how to gain Brahman. Direct answer for that is given in the mantra 2, and further explanation is given in mantras 3, 4 and 5. Parena Nakam is a great construction. Kam means joy. Akam means in Sanskrit most of the times is opposite in meaning. Akam means no joy. No joy refers to sorrow. Na akam means no sorrow, great joy. Fabulous construction this is. It refers to heaven. So Nakam actually refers to heaven. But the term that is given here is Parena Nakam. Parena Nakam means that which is higher than heaven. It is a very beautiful way of putting it. Swamiji usually gives an example, worldly example to prove this point. Again, this example has limitation. You have to understand in worldly context. A person is in a fabulous spirit all the time. He is a jolly person, living life to his fullest. He goes to club, he plays golf, and he is in high spirits always. Generally a very happy person. So such a person, suddenly his family meets with a accident and all of them die. He is in extreme sorrow now. He is totally broken. That person is completely shattered. He is in a state of sorrow. And it takes time for him to forget it. And maybe 2 years later, whatever be the time, I'm just saying, that he is not now brooding over the loss. He is somewhat come out of it. So, at that point of time, he is in the state of Akam. That means, he is in the state of Nakam. First he was in the state of Kam. Then when the thing happens, he is in the state of Akam. Now, he is not having that sorrow. So that means he is in the state of Akam. Nakam. Nakam means no sorrow. But he has not come back to his original state of going to the club and singing and dancing, that sort of a life. That is not there. But you can say he is not in the state of sorrow. So, Nakam or heaven is indicated as a state of joy or a state of definitely no sorrow. This is one of the indications given as to how the gods are there in heaven. They have no agitation, no sorrow whatsoever. All the enjoyments, suppose you take it as a value given to it in the earth, it is 10 times, 100 times, 1000 times like that. And sort of here how it is interspersed by sorrow and agitation, that is not there. So they go on a sort of a continuous state of joy. But from the ultimate point of view, that is not the highest joy. That also has got a limitation. With reference to our worldly joy, it is no doubt greater joy, but that is also limited. Limited in the sense, we may not be able to visualize its limit, but it is still limited. That is why Upanishads give it in terms of higher progressions of exponential progression, like a geometric progression. It is given higher and higher joys are there. So what we experience as human joy is what maximum we know, but you can sort of imagine and multiply your joys by 10 times, 100 times, 1000 times. Each and every stage of heaven is like that, up to Brahmaloka, he says. Here he is talking about heaven. But all those things which are various gradations are heaven, you can say we enjoy the happiness there or enjoyment there. They are different in degree. What you enjoy here may be compared there. What is the difference between difference in degree and difference in kind?
Different
Degree
type
is just
of
more
joy.
or less.
So difference in degree means, first of all, it is comparable. Difference in kind means it cannot be really compared. If you say in one way a race horse and a normal horse, it is difference in degree. Or even a horse and a donkey, you can say difference in degree. You can say which is faster. But you cannot say which is faster, eagle or a dolphin. You know, it is swimming in the ocean and something is flying in the sky. It is not comparable. The comparison is different in kind. So here, up to Brahmaloka, whatever joy that a person can enjoy, it is different in degree. Various degrees it jumps. But the term given here is Parena Nakam. Parena Nakam means that which is higher than the heaven. Higher than whatever heaven you can conceive of. Parena Nakam. And Nihitam Guhayam. Where is that ultimate joy which is higher than the heaven? When you want to picturize that, when you say heaven and more than that, it gives a picture as though it is something very far beyond, etc. That he says, Nihitam Guhayam. It is there in the cave of your own heart. It is there within you only. Guha is a term given various places in Shastras and in Gita also. Guha, cave means that which is deep inside within us. Cave is usually very deep inside. It is so, and cave heart, Hridaya Guha, it is a term that is normally used. Heart also means the core of our personality. The very essence or core of your personality, where it is hidden deep inside. Therefore, it is called as Guha. So again, the picture of a cave is always associated with something gloomy, something dark. So immediately he says, Vibhrajate. Vibhrajate means it is illuminous, self-illuminous. It is resplendent. It is very bright. Yat yatayaha vishanti. That which the ascetics enter. Enter here means as though a river enters the ocean. As such, in technical terms, there is no going from one place to another. It is the realization of the self within as it is as an infinite entity. That's about all. I mean, any words cannot convey what it is. But for us to understand that we consider ourselves as a Jivatma or an individual self merges into that infinite Paramatma as it were, this is called as entering. So the river, which is having an individuality by itself, which has distinct qualities, which has distinct shape, size, etc., as long as it is running by itself till the point it reaches the ocean, in the ocean that individuality of that river is lost and it gains the totality of the ocean. Ocean, though we have given various names near various land masses like Indian Ocean or a Pacific Ocean or South China Sea, it is actually one entity, which is, as in the example you take, it as an infinite entity. Ocean is an infinite entity. Rivers are all finite entities. Ganga has a distinct color and a distinct taste. Yamuna, Krishna or Godavari, each and everything has a distinct individuality. But once all the rivers enter the ocean, none of it you can spot it out there. It all loses its individuality, but instantly what is gained is totality. This can be explained as a symbolism or a great representation for realization. So yad yatayo vishanti. So the ascetics, yatayaha means, here in this mantra 2 times yatayaha comes. Yatayaha usually refers to the renunciates only, but the real meaning of yatayaha means one who actually puts in a great effort and who is a very disciplined person, an ascetic. So it is not that sannyasa ashrama is very easy. That be very, very careful about it. The persons who take up sannyasa ashrama, they have to put in much more effort than others in maintaining the sanctity of that and the tapas that they do. They are hard working because their single pointed focus is the self. That is why even in tradition it is said, even if a person is genuinely wanting to take up that sannyasa ashrama, he must experiment for a while and check out if it is possible for him to live up to the standards that has been given for that. Otherwise, retrieve back. Vanaprastha ashrama, where you can just live with your wife, also it is possible. Then, like that, it is given. It is after certain institutionalization that sannyasa became very, very easy. That somebody is there to give some name and some change and akar robe, and it became free for all. It was not like that before. Even as recently as we can say, in the last century, Swami Chinmayananda, one of the greatest stalwarts and the torchbearer of modern Vedanta, and who took Gita to the masses, his service is unparalleled. He was probably not given sannyasa by his own guru, who Tapavana Maharaj, and he got sannyasa from Swami Shivananda, if we are not mistaken. That means, imagine the caliber of Swami Chinmayananda, and for him he said, do some more sadhana. Where are others who just take up a akar robe and do that? So yataya means one who puts a dedicated effort and ascetic. That is why this Vedantic knowledge is usually associated with renunciates. There are no doubt some stalwarts who have got that mental maturity at a young age. And even in Upanishads we have students like that. They are more of an exception than the rule. In the next Upanishad that we are going to see, Mundaka, the student is Shaunaka, a fulfilled householder. He sort of represents who is a person who is asking the question of self to a qualified guru. But there is Nachiketas in Kathopanishad. There could be other great people also who have got that spark at a very young age. But they are more of a inspiration for us and more of an exception to the rule. So in general, if you take the 4 stages of life, Brahmacharya ashrama is the first stage, then the Grahastha ashrama, which is the main stage, and then Vanaprastha, which is the recluse where he is withdrawn, but he can be in a garden, he can be in a forest, like that it is said, with his wife, but generally withdrawn from the family and doing subjective worships. And then finally is a mendicant who is a sannyasa. This is the general 4 stages that are given. These 4 stages seem to correspond with the 4 aspects of the Vedas also. There seems to be a parallel. In the Brahmacharya stage, mantras are taught. And of course, main thing is the teaching of mantras, not much of emphasis on meaning, etc. And then in the Grahastha stage, where he is using all the mantras to do the karma, rituals. So it's a very action oriented stage of life. Most important, or rather the lengthy part of life, is that Grahastha ashrama. And in the Vanaprastha ashrama, when he is withdrawn, he is able to do the subjective worships as given in Aranyaka. And then when he comes to Sannyasa ashrama, he is able to directly relate to the Upanishads. This is a general, as I am saying, it is a general pattern that we see. It is given as a general thing. But not necessarily on a one-to-one basis. There could be a stalwart who can be, as I said, without even getting into Grahastha ashrama, he can directly go to the last stage of inquiry into self. There are great stalwarts like that. But this seems to be the general thing. So, yatayaha, or we see yati. Yati means, it comes from this one. Yati is a sannyasi. Namashri Yatirajaya Vivekananda Suraye is a shloka attributed to Yatiraja. Yatiraja means he is a king among renunciate. Vishanti, they enter. So it is a very clear indication that unless otherwise a person goes into the stage of renunciation, the next stage of realization is not possible. Therefore, for us, one message that we can derive here is that if at all we need to keep a relative ideal in life, we can aim towards going and achieving the stage of renunciation in a lifetime. if a person has a relative goal, realization may be too far off or to conceive as of now what it is and to work for it on a continual basis. At least we can keep a target of how to get into the stage of renunciation. And it is not directly related with age that by the time you retire and you take up automatically Gita study will come and then you will renounce. It is not related to physical age. It has to do with your mental withdrawal only. So that is what we need to practice as we do karma. When we do karma in the proper way, only then it can. So our aim, if we are not able to visualize realization very clearly, we can at least visualize the stage of renunciation. Again, as I said, how it is achieved, whether you are in the household or going away from society, all that is all different. That is all, we need not worry about that. But we need to worry about getting into that mental state of a higher consciousness. Such a person who has reached there, he is able to get into the self. So in the famous diagram of Swamiji also, he puts 3 lines here: karma, bhakti, jnana. All this is the stage of extrovert where he does different yogas, etc. Then you enter the main road. There is uparati, then there is dharana, dhyana. Only then the samadhi comes. So one has to have that stage of completely withdrawing oneself from the world, and then that person is qualified to enter into the state of self-realization. Now this portion of Upanishads is also going to introduce a very beautiful concept, the concept of liberation through stages. This Upanishad is called as Kaivalya Upanishad. Kaivalya means, as we said in the first class, it is direct. Kaivalya, Kevala. Kevala means that alone. And Kaivalya Mukti means direct liberation. Another type of liberation is liberation in stages. Krama Mukti it is called. And another path is path of return. It is not liberation, you go and come back. Going and coming back is one thing. Going and going from there is another thing. Directly reaching realization is 3. These 3 are going to be discussed. In fact, today is a very auspicious day of Uttarayana. In the 8th chapter of Gita, he uses the symbolism of Uttarayana and Dakshinayana to explain the concept of path of return and path of no return. Path of return is the path where you go and come back. Path of no return is where you go and from there you go to realization, liberation. And direct liberation is achievable here and now. We'll see that in the next class. Yes, sir.
You have said that action is a product of ignorance.
Yes.
And because of action, the balance of the karma, a person takes a human body. The body is also a product of karma only. Now, that means to say that only Videha Mukti should be considered as liberation, not the Jivan Mukti, because even in Jivan Mukti after that, the body remains, that means the karma remains, that means the ignorance remains.
That is why we give that example of, it's just a prarabdha karma of a jnani that is going on. It is, as far as he is concerned, he is not the body there. He has no attachment to the body or no connection to the body, as it were. So from our point, we see him moving, doing etc. things, and like us, he is traveling in the world. Maybe he is inspiring others. That is explained with reference to the lingering prarabdha karma. As far as his merger with the self is concerned, once the entire Sanchita is burnt and the knowledge is already dawned, he is realized. From his standpoint, only self remains there. So, Jivan Mukti is possible.
Basically, in this, the second mantra, what we are talking, Tyage Naike. Naike means some. Now, why is it given some? Not all, in the sense that is it a process of somebody coming back with chances of falling back, or is there something else to it?
No. As I said, he is also saying, na karmana, na prajaya, but some have attained through renunciation also. So as I said, it could be encouraged that some have attained. So it is there is a encouragement that all of us can attain in that sense. And some have taken this process of going through renunciation. Like in the 18th chapter of Gita, Moksha Sannyasa Yoga. Like by way of renunciation, they have attained liberation. So some have done like this. Like in the 13th chapter, Krishna says, Dhyanena atmani pashyanti kechid atmanam atmana anye sankyena yogena karma yogena chapare. Some have attained by meditation. Others have attained by karma yoga. Others are attained by Jnana Yoga. So some here, some there. According to their temperament and according to various things, various people take various paths. So all this finally boils down to coming into that mainstream of Shraddha, Bhakti and Dhyana. So some have attained through renunciation.
By this some indicate this is one of the paths.
One of the.
So these value systems in different stages of liberation, value system persists always, no?
No, you are talking about different stages of realization in terms of what we said as Krama Mukti?
Yes.
No, in Krama Mukti we have not yet explained. When we get to that, you will understand what it is. It has nothing to do with value systems. Yes, sir.
Sir, did I understand correctly? You said that there is no relation between karma and jnana?
Yeah, there is karma and jnana are basically opposed to each other.
But then, don't we need jnana to improve the quality of karma and come out of karma itself?
Mantra 14 and Mantra 11 of Ishavasya, we dealt in detail. Combine Vidya and Avidya. That is the solution. Go over it again. That is the solution. We'll conclude with the bhajans here.
पूर्णस्य पूर्णमादाय पूर्णमेवावशिष्यते। ॐ शान्ति शान्ति शान्तिः।